If a small boy lived alone in an old house next to you, would you knock on his door or tell yourself, it's not my business? The House on the Hill, setup and floor, about ordinary life plus moral choice. Daniel moved to the edge of town because he wanted quiet. After years of crowded buses, noisy offices, and late-night emails, the little street at the bottom of the hill felt like a soft sigh. 3 small houses, 1 dusty road, a line of trees, and standing a bit apart, an old grey house with peeling paint and a leaning chimney. That one, the taxi driver said as they passed it. Old Miller Place. Boy lives there now. Parents died last year. Tragic. Daniel turned his head quickly. Through the smudged window, he saw a small figure in the yard, raking leaves that were taller than his knees. A boy, maybe 9 or 10, in a sweater 2 sizes too big. Alone? Daniel asked. The driver shrugged. Social workers come sometimes. Neighbours send food, but he won't leave the house. Says it's where his parents are. Then he added the sentence people often use when they feel helpless. Anyway, not our business, right? Daniel made a small sound in his throat that could have been agreement. He thought of his own life. Long days, late calls, empty apartment. He had come here to rest, not to get involved in anything heavy. The boy, the house, the story. It all felt like a weight he wasn't sure he could carry. A week later, Daniel's things were unpacked, his new job done remotely, his routine almost peaceful. He woke early, made coffee, answered emails, watched the light move slowly across his small living room. Sometimes, when he looked up from his laptop, he could see the old house on the hill through his window. In the morning, smoke rose from its crooked chimney. In the afternoon, the boy hung laundry on a sagging rope. At dusk, a single yellow light burned in the upstairs room until very late. The second week, the neighbour from across the street, Mrs. Jenkins, brought him a pie. "You're new," she said, smiling politely. Then her eyes slid toward the hill. "You've seen him, I suppose." "The boy?" Daniel asked. She nodded. "Name's Noah. His parents died in a car accident on the bridge last winter. He was in the car too, but he survived. House belongs to him now. Social workers tried to place him with relatives, but he cried and begged to stay. So they visit. We all try to help a little." "That sounds hard," Daniel said. Mrs. Jenkins lowered her voice. "Be careful, though. Tragedy clings. My husband says we shouldn't get too involved. We can't save everyone, he says, so I send food now and then, leave it by the gate." Daniel felt an uncomfortable tug inside. "How old is he?" 10, she replied, too young to be that quiet. That night, Daniel stood at his own gate and looked up the hill. The old house had only one light on. The wind picked at its broken fence. A small shadow moved behind the curtain in the upstairs window. He could walk up there, he thought. He could knock, say hello, bring some bread, ask if the boy needed anything. Or he could go back inside, close his door, and stay in the warm pool of his own life. He hesitated for a long moment, hands in his pockets. Then with a sigh he turned away. "I can't fix everything," he whispered to himself, closing his door. He chose comfort over courage, and the choice settled quietly over the street, like a thin, cold fog. The test on the hill, mistaken karma, protagonist's mistake, plus folk test plus reversal. Days turned into weeks. The boy on the hill became part of the scenery of Daniel's life, like the trees or the old lamppost. He learned the patterns without meaning to. The boy fetched water from the outside tap every morning. He walked alone to the small grocery store on Saturdays, holding a list in one hand and a few folded bills in the other. On rainy days, he stayed inside, the house dim except for that one upstairs light. One afternoon, Daniel also went to the grocery store. It was raining softly, the kind of rain that turned the whole town grey. Inside, in the bread aisle. He saw him. Noah stood in front of the shelves with a basket that held only a bag of rice, 2 cans of soup, and a small carton of milk. He held a handful of coins, counting them slowly with his lips moving. The cashier watched from a distance, bored. Daniel walked past, pushing his cart. He heard the boy whisper, "If I don't get bread, maybe I can get eggs. But the eggs might break." There was a pause, then the sound of coins being counted again one by one. Daniel's chest ached for reasons he didn't want to examine. He took a loaf of bread from the shelf and held it for a moment. One loaf, he thought, one loaf, one kind word, one ride home in the rain. How hard could it be? Then another voice spoke up inside him, the old tired one. You don't know him. What if it gets complicated? What if people misunderstand? What if the social workers get angry? You moved here for peace, not problems. It's not your job. He put the bread back. He turned away. At the checkout, Daniel paid for his groceries and left quickly, not daring to look back and see whether the boy had to put anything back. That night, the rain grew heavier. Wind scraped along the roofs and power lines hummed. Around 9 o'clock, the lights on the street flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The neighborhood slipped into darkness, lit only by the pale light of the rising moon. Daniel lit a candle in his living room and sat near the window. The old house on the hill was just a darker shadow against the sky. For the first time since he'd moved in, he couldn't see the single yellow light in the upstairs room. He told himself there was no reason to worry. The power outage affected everyone. The boy was used to being alone. Social workers surely had plans. Systems were in place. Adults somewhere must be watching. Someone else will handle it, he told himself. The same excuse people have used for centuries when they want to be kind but don't want to change anything. The wind grew louder. The rain hammered the roof. Then Daniel saw a small movement on the road. A thin figure in a raincoat slipped on the wet path, fell to one knee, then stood again. Head down, the figure moved slowly, unsteadily, toward his house. It was Noah. Daniel's heart skipped. For a moment he was frozen, gripping the candle. The boy reached Daniel's gate, hesitated, then turned away as if thinking better of it. That was the moment. The test, a simple, quiet test, like in old stories where a traveller in disguise knocks on doors and waits to see who will open. Daniel put the candle down and went to his door. His hand rested on the handle. He could stay where he was. No one would know. He could watch the boy walk back up the hill and tell himself it was sad, but not his responsibility. Or he could finally do the thing he had been avoiding since he arrived. He opened the door. "Noah!" he called softly into the rain. The boy stopped and turned, rain dripping off his hair. "Hello," Noah said, voice small but polite. "Sorry, I didn't mean to bother you." "You're not bothering me," Daniel said quickly. "Are you okay?" "The power went out," Noah explained. "I have candles, but the roof is leaking in my bedroom again. I thought maybe you had a bucket I could borrow." He tried to smile. "I'll bring it back tomorrow, I promise." Something inside Daniel broke, quietly and cleanly. All the excuses, the fear of getting involved, the desire to stay safe and distant, none of it looked noble anymore. It just looked like cowardice. "Come in," Daniel said. "We'll find a bucket and a towel and some dry socks." Noah's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Daniel said, stepping aside. "I should have asked you in a long time ago." Noah stepped into the warm hallway shivering. As Daniel found a towel and a bucket, he asked, "How long has the roof been leaking?" "A while," Noah answered, rubbing his hands. "Mr. Grant said he'd fix it, but he's busy." "Who is Mr. Grant?" "The man who wants to buy my house," Noah said simply. "He says it's too big for a boy. He says if I sign some papers, he'll give me money, and I can live in an apartment above his store. but my mum and dad painted every wall in that house. I don't want to leave. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What papers? I don't know, Noah replied. Grown-up papers. He's coming tomorrow to talk about it again. He says if I don't sign soon, the house will get worse, and it won't be worth anything. And then I'll lose everything. There it was, the real antagonist. Not a monster with claws, but greed dressed up as helpful advice. A man willing to take advantage of a lonely child whose only crime was wanting to stay where his parents' memories lived. And there was Daniel, who had walked past that house for weeks, telling himself it wasn't his problem. Now the test was no longer small. His past indifference had allowed greed to grow bolder. He poured hot chocolate into 2 mugs and set one in front of Noah. Listen, Daniel said gently, if someone wants you to sign papers, you shouldn't do it alone. Even grown-ups take lawyers with them. Has your social worker seen them? I don't know, Noah said. Mr. Grant always comes when they've just left. He says they're busy and don't understand. He says neighbours mind their own business. Daniel heard those words like a slap. Mind their own business. Tomorrow, Daniel said slowly. When Mr. Grant comes, I'll be there too, if you want. You would? Noah asked, hope flickering in his eyes. Yes, Daniel answered. I've been acting like the house on the hill is far away, but it isn't. It's right next door. Noah wrapped his hands around the warm mug. Thank you, he whispered. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside the small kitchen, something shifted. The distance between one house and another became smaller, and the cold fog of indifference began to lift. The next morning, the sky was clear and sharp. Daniel walked up the hill with Noah, carrying the borrowed bucket. In daylight, the old house looked even more fragile. Cracked steps, missing shingles, a porch that creaked with every move. You shouldn't be living alone in all this, Daniel muttered. It's okay, Noah said. The house knows me. It gets sad when people talk about selling it. They went inside. The air smelled of dust and old wood, and underneath, faintly, the ghost of perfume and coffee, and something sweet, memories of parents who had filled the house with life. In the kitchen, a stack of papers lay neatly on the table. They weren't there yesterday, Noah frowned. He must have left them last time. Daniel picked them up and scanned the first page. Legal language, small print, terms that twisted around themselves like snakes. At the bottom of the last page, in large letters, was a line for the seller's signature. Next to it, someone had written Noah Miller, minor, and drawn a little arrow. Daniel's jaw tightened. This isn't right, he said. He can't do this to you. At that moment, a car door slammed outside. Footsteps approached the house, confident and heavy. Morning, champ, called a cheery voice from the porch. Ready to become a rich man today? Noah flinched. Daniel put the papers back on the table and stood beside the boy. The door opened without knocking. Mr. Grant was in his 50s, with neat hair and shiny shoes. He smelled faintly of expensive cologne and stale coffee. He stopped when he saw Daniel. Oh, he said, his smile tightening. Didn't know we had company. I'm Daniel, Daniel said mildly. Neighbour from down the hill. Ah, Mr. Grant replied. Well, this is a private business discussion. Noah is 10, Daniel interrupted. Nothing about his house is a private business discussion. Mr. Grant laughed lightly, as if this were all a misunderstanding. I'm just trying to help the boy, he said. This place is falling apart. The roof leaks, the wiring is a mess. I'm offering him a chance at a new life. A modern apartment, money in the bank, you know how it is. I know how contracts work, Daniel replied, and I know social services should be here if you expect a minor to sign anything. For the first time, something cold appeared in Mr. Grant's eyes. Social services are busy, he said. I'm a practical man. The boy wants to stay here, but what he wants isn't always what's best. Besides, The law allows many things, Daniel cut in, but exploiting a grieving child isn't on the list. He took his phone from his pocket. I think we should call his social worker now, he said softly, or the police. We can ask them what they think of these papers. There was a long pause. The room, the house, and even the dust seemed to hold their breath. Mr. Grant's smile vanished completely. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. No, Daniel answered. I already made my mistake. I saw a child alone and told myself it wasn't my problem. Today I'm correcting that. Mr. Grant's face hardened. He snatched the papers from the table, crumpled them a little, and shoved them into his briefcase. You'll regret interfering, he hissed. Maybe, Daniel said, but I'd regret staying silent even more. Mr. Grant stalked out of the house and slammed the door. The sound echoed through the empty rooms, then faded. Noah looked up at Daniel. Is it over? He asked. Not yet, Daniel replied, but it started. That afternoon, Daniel called the social worker, explained everything, and sent photos of the papers. The social worker's voice grew sharp and professional. Thank you for telling us, she said. We suspected something, but we didn't know he was pressuring Noah like that. We'll investigate at once. Karma had started to move, quiet but unstoppable. The light in the window, lesson and gratitude, lesson learned plus moral conclusion. In the weeks that followed, the story of the house on the hill slowly changed. Mr. Grant was investigated for trying to trick several elderly and vulnerable homeowners into signing unfair contracts. His name, once respected around town, became a mixture of shame and warning. Did you hear what he did? People whispered at the market, to the boy, to the others. Imagine if no one had spoken up. His new real estate project stalled. Banks pulled back. Clients chose other agents. His greed, which had once looked like cleverness, now looked like what it had always been, a hunger that hurt others. Meanwhile, the social workers visited the old house more often. They brought an inspector who shook his head at the leaking roof and frayed wires. This place has a good heart, the inspector said, patting the wall, but it needs help. Because Daniel had stepped in, they also found a long-forgotten aunt living 2 towns away. She had thought Noah was already placed in a foster home and believed she wasn't needed. When she learned the truth, she came immediately, tears running down her face as she hugged the boy at the gate. I'm so sorry, she cried. I should have fought harder. I should have asked more questions. It's okay, Noah said shyly. We have time now. The plan changed. The aunt agreed to become his guardian. The house would be repaired with help from a small fund set aside by Noah's parents and a charity that supported children who had lost their families. The old house would no longer be a lonely fortress for a grieving child, but a shared home with someone who loved him. On the day the roofers came, Daniel stood at his own gate and watched men climb ladders and carry new shingles up to the top of the hill. Noah ran down the path toward him, waving. Look, the boy said breathlessly. They're fixing it, and Aunt Maria says you're invited to dinner when everything's done. She wants to thank you. You don't have to thank me, Daniel replied, feeling his throat tighten. But I want to, Noah insisted. If you didn't open your door that night, Mr. Grant would have made me sign those papers. I would have lost my home. I would have lost them. He tilted his chin toward the house, where the ghosts of his parents lived in the paint and the steps and the scent of the kitchen. Daniel knelt so he could look the boy in the eyes. I should have knocked weeks earlier, he admitted. I saw you. I heard about you. And I stayed silent because it was easier. I'm sorry for that. Noah thought about it, then smiled. You knocked when it mattered most, he said. Sometimes stories start late, but they can still end well. The simple wisdom of the words surprised Daniel. He realized something then. Noah was not just a child to be helped. He was also a kind of mirror, showing Daniel who he had been and who he could choose to be instead. That night, for the first time since he moved in, Daniel couldn't see the light in the old house because the power was off again for maintenance. But he wasn't worried. He was sitting at the kitchen table inside the old house this time, under the glow of 3 candles, eating soup with Noah and Aunt Maria. The walls, newly painted, smelled fresh. The roof no longer leaked. Laughter echoed in rooms that had been silent for too long. Aunt Maria raised her spoon. 2 unexpected neighbours, she said warmly, who remember that someone else's problem can also be their chance to be human. Daniel lifted his glass of water in return. 2 houses on hills, he replied, and to boys brave enough to ask for a bucket in the rain. Noah giggled. After dinner, as Daniel walked back down the hill under a sky full of stars, he felt lighter than he had in years. He thought about the first night he'd stood at his gate, looking up at the lonely house, and then telling himself he was too tired to care. He thought about the grocery store, the coins, the leaves piled high. He realized his life hadn't felt truly quiet back then. It had felt empty. Now it was still simple, but it was connected, and connection, he understood, was a different kind of peace, one that came not from shutting the world out, but from letting someone in. At his own window, he paused and looked up the hill. There, in the old house, the upstairs window was dark, but behind it, he knew, a boy was sleeping under a dry roof, with an aunt down the hall and a future that no longer depended on greedy hands. The street was calm. His heart was calm. Curiosity had brought him to this little town. Reflection had shown him his flaw. A simple choice in a storm had become his turning point. The lesson had settled softly into his life. And now, all that was left was gratitude. Morale sometimes, not my business, is just another way of saying, I'm afraid to care. Greed grows strongest in the quiet spaces where good people look away, but one open door, one small act of courage, can turn a lonely house into a home again, and a stranger into family. CTA, think of someone on the hill in your own life. A quiet neighbour, a lonely colleague, a child who always walks alone. What is one small knock you could make today? If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still changes endings.